Good morning, everyone. For today, I'll be discussing to you Chapter 2, which is the chemical basis of life. So, for the introduction, we should define what chemistry is. So, chemistry is a scientific discipline concerned with the anatomic composition and structure of substances and the reactions they undergo. So, this branch of science is very important when it comes to understanding the basics of chemical reactions in your body. So some of the basic terms that you should know with chemistry is the concept of matter. So even if during our earlier years in studying, we already know what matter is. So it's a composition of all living and non-living things which occupy space and has mass. So this matter, mga bagay-bagay around us, they have mass and weight. But what differentiates mass and weight is that mass is the amount of matter in an object, and it's usually being defined with the international unit of kilogram. But in the weight, there's always an act of the gravitational force of an object of a given mass. So let us use this simple diagram to explain what is the difference of the weight and the mass. So with the weight, if you're on Earth, it will be around 560 newtons. But if you're in the moon, it's around 90 newtons. But the mass is always 56 kilograms. So the difference is apparently with the gravitational force being acted upon. But anywhere you go, you have the same mass. It doesn't change. The only thing that changes is your weight depending on the amount of gravitational force that is being acted upon a matter. Okay? So kahit saan kayo pumunta, your mass is definite, hindi siya nagbabago, but the weight changes depending on how far or how near you are with with the gravitational force. So since mas malayo si moon, no, kapag pumunta kayo sa moon, mas magaan talaga yung weight nyo, but the mass doesn't change. Okay? So you also have elements. So these are the simplest type of matter living unique chemical properties, and some are only present in only trace amounts but are still essential for life. So even though they are kakaunti, no, kailangan pa rin sila to be able for your system to work properly. Okay, so some examples would be your carbon, you have your hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, potassium, sodium, and chloride. And then you have your atom, which is the smallest particle of an element, and it contains the protons, electrons, and your neutrons. So a fact, 96% of the body's weight results from the elements oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. So for the basic anatomic structure, this is how it looks like. So the proton is positively charged and it is found inside the nucleus. So this one. So if this is the nucleus, you have here your protons, which are usually positively charged. And then inside, you will also see there the neutral atoms, which you call your neutrons. So they are also found inside the nucleus. And then if you go outside the outer orbit, you will be able to see there the electrons, which are negatively charged, and it represents the electron cloud. So these are the planetary models of the anatomic structure. So basically, you'll be able to see here the differences of the sizes. Okay, so here in the hydrogen atom, you will only see here one proton and then one electron outside. And then for a carbon atom, you will see here 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and then outside you will see 6 electrons. And then for the oxygen atoms, you have 8 protons, 8 neutrons, and then 8 electrons. Okay. So for the anatomic structure, if you're very familiar with the table of elements, you have there your atomic number and your mass number that actually determines the type of atoms or elements being described on it. Okay, so what are the anatomic numbers for? So the anatomic number is the number of protons in each atom, and then you have your mass number, which is the number of proton and neutrons in each atom. So take note that protons and neutrons have about the same mass compared to the electrons, which are very little mass. And you have also your protons and electrons, which have the same in number in atom. Okay, so how do you actually determine or compute for the atomic number? So the atomic number is just equal to the number of protons. And then for the mass number, for you to be able to determine it, again, it's just the total amount of the protons plus your neutrons. And then usually your protons are just equal to electrons. So in this slide, this is actually a simple exercise for you to be able to compute for the protons, neutrons, electrons, atomic number, and your mass number. Again, for you to be able to answer this, remember that atomic number is equal to the proton number, and then mass number is equivalent to the protons plus its neutrons, and then the protons is equal to the electron. Okay, so you should know how to compute for these numbers given the information that I have provided. So for the chemical bonds, you have the chemical bonding, which occurs when outermost electrons are transferred or shared between atoms. And then, of course, you have your ions, which are formed when an atom loses or gains electrons, like your protons and electrons are no longer equal. So they are charged particles. So there are different types of chemical bonding. The first one is your ionic bonding, wherein there's attraction between two oppositely charged ions. So the classic example would be your table salt, wherein your sodium is positively charged and then the chloride is negatively charged. So if you see here on the diagram, your sodium atom loses one of its electrons and binds to the chloride ion to be able to form your sodium chloride. Okay? Other types of the chemical bonding includes your covalent bonding, which atoms share one or more pairs of electrons. For example, your hydrogen molecule. So you have here your single covalent bonds. Ito yung isa lang yung bonding nila, but then you'll be able to see also the double covalent bonds. So the more bonds you have in this types of bonding, mas rigid yung connection nila. Okay? Hindi sila madaling i-break. And then you also have your polar covalent bonds. This is the unequal sharing of electrons. For example, your water, which is H2O. And then you have your non-polar covalent bond, wherein equal sharing of electrons happen. So for the polar molecules, these are molecules with asymmetrical electrical charge. They have a positive end and a negative end. And then for the non-polar molecules, so they have symmetrical electrical charges. So that would be positive, positive, negative, negative. Next, you also have your hydrogen bonds. So this forms when positive end of one polar molecule is weakly attracted to the negative end of another polar molecule. So this is a weaker bond than ionic or a covalent bond. Okay, so this is an example. If you have a water molecule here and then you have another bond here, okay, this in between is your hydrogen bond. So there is a weak charge that is attracted to another negative end, okay, of a water molecule. Next, you have your dissociation. So dissociation happens when ionic compounds dissolve in water because the positive or negative charged ions are attracted to the positive or negative ends of the water molecules. So, ito yung kapag ka nagde-dissolve kayo ng salt into water or kaya yung kape sa tubig. So, what happens is that all of the molecules within those granules dissociate or naghihiwalay sila. So, we also have what you call the electrolytes. This is the term used for dissociated ions. They have the capability to conduct electrical current. So, di ba nga, ang salt with water, pwede siyang maging source of electricity because, again, yung mga ions ng water, they can be positively or negatively charged. Okay? Next, you also have your molecules, which are formed when two or more atoms chemically combine to form a structure that behaves an independent unit. So you have, for example, your water. And then a compound is a substance from the chemical combination of two or more different types of atoms. For example, your sodium chloride or table salt. So for different types of chemical reactions, when you say chemical reactions, these are the formation or breaking of chemical bonds. Okay? So for you to be able to have a successful chemical reaction, of course, you should have your reactants. So reactants are the substances to put into the reaction. And then, of course, the end result of the reaction is what you call the products. Okay? So you have your reactants. So ito yung parang tinatawag natin na recipe, no? Kung ano yung mga sahog, mga reactants. And then, of course, the products would be the main dish, kung ano yung kalalabasan ng mga sahog na yon. Okay? That's the simplest explanation about chemical reactions. So the other classification of chemical reactions includes, first, the synthesis reaction. This is when two or more reactants combine to form a larger or more complex product, and this is actually energy requiring. So if these are your reactants, your product will be this one. So A plus B, your product will be AB. So a classic example would be your adenosine diphosphate plus a phosphate that will become adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so when you combine two reactants, it will actually require you energy. Okay, para mabuo sila kailangan ng energy. And then you have here what you call your anabolism. This is the collective term for all synthesis reactions that occur in the body. So for example, growth and repair in your body. Okay. Next, you have your decomposition reaction. So in decomposition, this is the reverse, okay, of your synthesis reaction. So your reactants are broken down into smaller and less complex products. So you have your products, and then babalik sila sa pagiging reactants. But apparently, ito yung reactants, and then these are your products. So kabaliktaran. So it also follows the catabolism, which is the collective term for all decomposition reactions that occur in the body. So for example, digestion of food molecules in the intestine and within the cells, and of course the breakdown of fat stores. And then you also have this anabolism and catabolism is what you call collectively as the metabolism. Okay. Next, you have your exchange reactions. So this is a combination of a decomposition reaction and a synthesis reaction. So for example, you have here your reactants, AB plus CD. Ang mangyayari, they will exchange partners. Okay? So your end products will be AC plus BD. Example, you have your hydrochloric acid and then your sodium hydroxide. It will become salt and water at the end. Okay, so for you to be able to have successful reactions, usually merong mga nag-intervene. Okay, so an example would be your enzymes, which speeds up your reaction. Next one, you have your reversible reactions. So these are chemical reactions that can proceed from reactants to products and vice versa. And then the rate of product formation is equal to the rate of reactant formation. So reaction is said to be in equilibrium. So again, we have the same example. So ibig sabihin lang nun na from hydrochloride to sodium hydroxide, it will become sodium chloride plus water. So kapag sila naman ang nag-react, ganun din ang magiging product. Okay? So, kahit pagpalit-palitin sila, they will just result to the same products. Next, let's go to energy and chemical reactions. So first, energy is the ability to do work. Next, you have your kinetic energy, which is the energy in motion. Then you have your potential energy, which is your stored energy. And then chemical energy is the energy stored in chemical bonds like food. So first, this is actually the sources of energy in our body. You have your glucose, which is the sugar found in food. It is used to make ATP, or the energy currency of your cell. Okay. And then you also have your glycogen, which is stored glucose. They are stored in the liver, the skeletal muscles, and your fats. And then you also have your mechanical energy. This is the energy resulting from the position and movement of objects. So ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is again the energy currency of the cell. So this ATP gives energy to most of the organs or inclusions of the cell. Okay, so this is stored energy, and when ATP is broken down, it is being energy is being released. So kung natatandaan nyo kanina sa sinabi ko, when in your synthesis reactions, di ba? ADP plus P requires energy, kumuha siya ng energy. But if ATP is being changed into ADP or synthesized into ADP plus phosphate, it will now release the energy. Okay? So for the ATP, ano bang meron sa ATP? So you see here phosphate groups, and then you also see here sugar, and then you see here also nitrogenous bases. So later on you will know more about what are these nitrogenous bases. So what affects chemical reactions? So first you have reactants, of course. So are they positively or negatively charged? Are they single bonded or double bonded? Are they different in forms? Okay. You also have your concentration gradient. A temperature is also a factor. And then of course you also have your catalysts, okay, which speeds up the metabolism process. So the rate of chemical reactions, of course, the rate is at which a chemical reaction proceeds is influenced by several factors. So again, the concentration of the reactants, the temperature, and your catalyst. So the rate of chemical reactions, you should consider a few things. First, you have your concentration, which is the concentration should be within the limits. The higher the concentration of reactants, the faster the rate is. You also have your temperature within limits. The higher the temperature, the faster the rate. And then the catalyst increases the rate of reaction without itself being permanently changed or depleted. So these are the example of some acids and bases. So when you say acids, they donate hydrogen protons or positively charged ions. They are pH below 7. An example would be hydrochloric acid. And then you also have your bases. They accept hydrogen, and then their pH is above 7. They are considered alkaline, like sodium hydroxide. And the neutral pH is equal to 7. So if you see here in the examples, okay, so 7 distilled water is actually neutral. Your blood is neutral. Black coffee sa mga mahilig sa kape. So dahan-dahan lang because it is acidic. Okay, those who want beer, kung manginginom tayong lahat, ano, they are very, very acidic. Okay, so the most dangerous acid would be your hydrochloric acid because it can, nakakasunog siya. May it be damit, sa balat, lalo na sa balat kapag na-expose ka ng sobra-sobra. And then, of course, you have here your bases like your baking soda, your Great Salt Lake, and then soda ashes. Okay. So for the salts, it is a compound consisting of a positive ion other than hydrogen and a negative ion other than hydroxide. So they are formed by the reaction of acids plus bases. So for example, you have here your acid, which is the hydrochloric acid, plus sodium hydroxide, which is a base. It would result to salt, which is your sodium chloride plus water. Okay. Next, you have your buffers. These are chemicals that resist changes in pH when either an acid or base is added to a solution containing the buffer. Okay? So guys, yung mga buffers na to, usually they are being added to chemicals, no, para hindi magbago yung pH level. So even if mag-add kayo or masobrahan nyo yung lagay, for example, ng mga acids, but pero dahil may buffer siya, hindi siya agad-agad nag-change of pH. Okay, so yun yung ginagawa ng mga buffers. May it be malagyan nyo siya ng sobrang acid or sobrang base, hindi ka agad-agad magbabago yung pH nung mixture na ginagawa nyo. Okay? Then you also have your types of molecules. So first, you have your inorganic molecules. These are substances that do not contain carbon. Okay, so like your oxygen and your water. So they are stabilizing body temperature, they provide protection, they facilitate chemical reactions, and transport substances. So an exception to this would be your carbon dioxide. Okay. So the organic molecules, they are carbon-containing molecules, and the major groups wherein they belong includes your carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and your nucleic acids. So let's start with your carbohydrates. So they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. So we call them the CHO atoms. So the ratio would be 2:1. There would be 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. Okay, so for example is your C6H12O6 or your common table sugar. Okay, so they are monosaccharides and are the building blocks of your carbohydrates. So monosaccharides do produce carbohydrates. So examples here are your glucose and your fructose. When they are combined, you'll be able to produce your sucrose. Okay? So when you say monosaccharides, isang sugar lang. When you say disaccharide, dalawang sugar, combined sugar. Kapag polysaccharide, they are already made up of more than 2 or 3 types of sugars. So, ayan. For monosaccharide, example will be your simple sugar. Others are what we call your glucose and your fructoses. Next is your disaccharide. So, glucose plus fructose would result to sucrose. Glucose plus galactose is your lactose. And then polysaccharides or the many sugars include starch, your grains, your vegetables, and your glycogen. So the functions of your carbohydrates, they are short-term energy storage. They are converted to glucose quickly. Glucose is used to make ATP and brain cells require glucose. Kaya nga guys, kung mapapansin nyo, whenever that you're up to doing a lot of work for the day or you will be taking your exams, usually you're being asked to intake sugar because, again, sugar stimulate your brain cells to think. They would actually give you the ample amount of energy for you to go out through the day. So, ganyan ka-importante yung pagte-take in ng carbohydrates like yung kanin, maybe chocolate or candy before you take your exam. So they stimulate your brain cells and to help you, with your energy. So another importance would be they are the precursors or sila yung nagiging source para magawa yung mga ATP na kailangan ng mga cells natin sa body. Next, you have your protein. So, paborito nating lahat to for sure. This contains this carbon, your hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen atoms. So, they are the CHON atoms. So, their building blocks is what you call the amino acids, and there are 20 different amino acids available. So, they contain an amine group and a carboxyl group. So these are the groups that gives them a specific description. Okay, so sila yung mga may amines and carboxyl. So amino acid aren't stored, so a daily supply is required. So every day, di ba, kung mapapansin nyo dun sa ideal na diet plan ng isang tao, usually you have your sugars, you have your vegetables, of course you have your meat also. Kasi ang proteins, hindi talaga siya nai-store sa katawan. So, kailangan kahit paano, every day we take in proteins. May it be in the form of fish, meat, may it be white or red meat, pwedeng gatas, pwedeng eggs. Okay, anything that has protein. You also have your nuts. And then, for the functions of your protein, they are used to they are basically found in your skin, your hair, your nails, and your muscles. They are also found in your hemoglobin. They also act as enzymes. They also have functions in your immune system. They are also responsible for your muscle contractions, especially your actin and myosin filaments. And then, of course, they are part of your cell membrane. So this is a linear sequence of the amino acids in a protein. So usually, ganyan siya, mahaba. Okay? So a protein consists of a chain of different amino acids. And these are represented here in this diagram with the different colored spheres. Okay? So amino acids can be a series of different types of amino acids. Okay, yung mga protein sa katawan or sa protein sa ibang pagkain, they can be formed using different amino acids. So, uso din kasi sa protein ang protein folding. Okay, ito yung mga nagbibigay usually ng shape. Usually you have your primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary foldings of your proteins. So, this representation that you see on your screen right now is a representation of the amino acid chain that shows the hydrogen bonds between different amino acids. So the hydrogen bonds cause the amino acid chain to become folded or coiled. Okay? So the more coiled your protein is, syempre yung magiging result nun is mas coiled then and folded yung protein, like your hair, okay? 'Di ba, ang hair ng tao may straight, may wavy, meron ding super kulot. Okay, usually yung mga straight hairs, meron lang silang type of primary proteins. And then yung mga wavy, it can be secondary or tertiary, pero yung mga talagang kulot na kulot ang buhok. Okay? Sila yung mga may tinatawag na quaternary folding of proteins. Okay, so the more hydrogen bonds there are, the more curly the hair is. Okay? So, for the protein denaturation, ibig sabihin ng protein denaturation, it occurs when the hydrogen bonds that maintain shape of a protein are broken and the protein becomes non-functional. So, factors that can cause denaturation are high temperatures and or improper pH. So, gayahin natin yung example natin with the hair. Okay? Diba sa mga kulot na tao, sabi natin, they have a quaternary type of protein folding. So, with the action of high temperatures like using your blowers, using your hair, yung mga plancha, di ba, it has high temperature, yun yung nagkukos para mag-break yung protein sa mga curly hair at nagiging diretso sila. So, yun yung tinatawag natin na protein denaturation. The higher the temperature of the plancha is, the higher the temperature of a curler is, no? O kaya a straightener. And minsan kapag gumagamit ka ng mga pangkulay sa buhok o kaya mga pang-bleach, 'di ba sila yung nagkakaroon ng reaction with the proteins of your hair. Okay? So, yun yung nangyayari. From kulot, pwedeng maging diretso, pwedeng gawing wavy. Okay? And then, for improper pH, if you have yung masyadong matapang na chemical sa buhok, ang nangyayari sa proteins naman is they are damaged. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng tinatawag na non-functional proteins. Kasi kapag once nagkaroon na ng damage, no, pwede na, kasi siya, there's a possibility of it being irreparable. Hindi na siya pwedeng ayusin. Okay? Next, you have your enzymes. So, enzymes are organic catalysts that increase the rate at which biochemical reactions proceed without the enzyme being permanently changed. So, enzymes work by lowering the energy activation. So, si enzymes nakakatulong talaga siya when it comes to different reactions to fasten, okay, para mapabilis yung reaction. So, here you have your activation energy enzyme. So, para maintindihan natin, how can we compare it sa ginagawa natin in a normal basis? So, it is parang pwede mo siyang i-compare dun sa pagtayo mo galing sa bed. Okay? So, in order for you to have the reaction take place, chemical bonds must be broken to allow new bonds to form. So, para magkaroon tayo ng gana na bumangon sa umaga, kailangan magkaroon ng activation yung katawan natin or energy. Okay? So, kapag yung mga bonds na yun, kunyari naputol na yung bonds natin sa kama, of course, it will allow us to get up of the bed. So, ganun yung ginagawa ng activation energy. So, when the bonds are broken and it is contorted, it's actually what you call the state of transition. Okay? So, yun yung, kunwari, babangon tayo, pumuna tayo, yun yung transition state natin. Okay? So, here, what you see on your screen is a diagram of how activation energy is being demonstrated. Okay? So, you have here your progress of the reaction time. Okay? Ito yung tagal. And then, you also have your free energy. Okay? So, you have here your reactant. So, for example, ikaw ito. So, kapag ang reactants, walang enzymes, okay, yung free energy na tinitake up niya is mas mataas. And then, it will result to the products. But if there is an active enzyme that is working on the reactants, mas konti yung nire-require niya ni energy for you to have your products. Okay? So, the activation energy without enzyme is greatly needed kapag walang enzyme at mas lower yung activation energy or free energy required kapag merong enzyme na nag-act upon dun sa reactants na yun. Okay? So, in these types of activation energies, you have two types actually. The first one is what you call your exergonic type of reaction. This is a forward reaction wherein the reactants are using activation energy to produce your products. And then you also have your endergonic type of reaction. This is naman the reverse direction wherein the transition state is the same but the activation energy would be larger, because product molecules have lower energy and would need more energy to reach the transition state at the top of the reaction hill. Okay, di ba sabi ko nga sa inyo guys, yung products kapag kailangan niyang bumalik as separate elements, mas nagre-release ng energy. Okay, mas kinakailangan ng mas mataas na energy for it to be broken down. Okay? So, the source of activation energy is usually heat, with reactant molecules absorbing thermal energy from their surroundings. So, temperature is really a factor when it comes to activation energies. So activation energy and the rate and the reaction rate, okay, is actually closely related with each other. So the greater the activity, the activation energy is, the lesser the chemical reaction will be, because molecules can only complete the reaction once they have reached the top of the activation energy barrier. So this is the reaction activation energy barrier. Okay. Next, you have your lipids. This contains the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. The ratio is 2:1. So they are insoluble in water. When you say insoluble in water, hindi sila basta-basta natutunaw sa tubig. Okay? So examples are your fats, oils, cholesterol, triglycerides, and your phospholipids. So glycerol and fatty acids are the building blocks of your lipids. And they function as long-term energy storage, insulates against heat loss, protective cushion for organs, and cholesterol is part of your cell membrane structure. Okay? So guys, for the energy storage, di ba kanina sabi, your carbohydrates are also energy storages, okay? But once your carbohydrates are already exhausted, the next ones to be used will be your lipids. So for example, wala ka ng kain, wala ka ng inom, wala kang kahit anong carbs na inintake sa body mo, the next one will that will be exhausted with will be your lipids. Kaya nga 'di ba kapag ka nagda-diet ang isang tao at hindi talaga siya nagte-take ng um, mga carbs, okay? So ang na-burn is yung lipids, kaya pumapayat. Okay? So actually, kapag ka sa mga matatabang tao, it's actually true that even if compared sa mga normal built, no, meron mas angat yung mga chubby or mga matatabang tao when it comes to energy storage. So siguro kahit hindi ka kumain ng ilang oras, at least you still have your reserves, fat reserves. So kunyari there would be if there's a calamity, talagang no food, no, mas matagal mabubuhay ang mga medyo may taba. Kasi kung payat ka at wala kang masyadong taba, wala nang ibang may exhaust sa katawan mo for energy other than the carbs. So pag naubos si carbs, wala na. Okay? So the types of lipids, first you have your saturated. These are single covalent bonded bonds between carbon atoms. So what you have here is your beef, pork, whole milk, cheese, and eggs. So sorry, that is a typo error. That's pork. And then you have your unsaturated lipids. These are one or more double covalent bonds between carbons, like your olive oil, fish oil, sunflower oil. So this is a diagram of how a phospholipid looks like. So you have there your nitrogen, you have your phosphorus in between, and then you have also your oxygen, the carbon, and your hydrogen atoms. So you see here that this is the polar region or the head region of the phospholipid. So this is hydrophilic. When you say hydrophilic, they love water. Okay, pwede silang dumikit sa tubig. But then you also have your non-polar regions, which includes your carbon and your hydrogen. Okay, the region of the fatty acid. This is hydrophobic, so takot sila sa tubig. Okay, so that's actually an important information that you should know when it comes to the phospholipids, kasi we will encounter this again when we study cell structures. Next, you also have your nucleic acids. They are composed of your carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphate. So an example will be your DNA, which is the deoxyribonucleic acid, and your RNA, or the ribonucleic acids. The building blocks are your nucleotides, and they are composed of the nitrogen base, your phosphate, and a 5-carbon sugar. Okay? So in this one, you will see here how it is being paired. So you have there your cytosine and your guanine is one. And then you also have your thymine and your adenine. So they are always being paired. Okay. So this nitrogenous bases, they actually have two different types. The first one will be your pyrimidines. Okay. This includes your thymine and cytosine. They are single-ringed nitrogenous bases, the thymine and your cytosine. And then your purines, okay, they are double-ringed. This is your guanine and your adenine. Okay, so kung mapapansin nyo with their structure, ito isang ring lang siya, the cytosine and your thymine. But with your adenine and guanine, which are your purines, they are double-ringed. Okay, and then this is the sugar, and then this is the phosphate group. Okay, so that actually ends my lecture for chapter 2, and I'll be posting this video in Canvas, and I'll also be sending a link for you in Streams if this is if this will be available, and I hope to see you next week for our further discussions.